friends. I'm here to recommend some kids' nonfiction books. Now, you may be the kind of person who reads nonfiction all the time and you can't wait to hear about these new books, or you may be a fiction reader who's not so sure. But I strongly encourage all of you to check out the great new nonfiction we've been getting into the library the last few months. There's so much good stuff that it was really hard to decide which books to share with you. I'm going to start with some books for the younger set among us and move up as we go. So let's get started. The first book that I have for you today is called A World Together. It's by Sonia Manzano, who's Maria from Sesame Street. And you might notice that this is a National Geographic kids book. I know a lot of you look for these books when you come into the library because they have such amazing, beautiful pictures. And that's definitely true of this book. This one takes you around the world and gives you some images of what life looks like for kids in different places. You'll notice as you read it that your school may look very different from the schools that some of these kids attend. Your food may look very different from some of the foods that other kids eat. But you'll also notice that we all have a lot in common. It is a great read aloud book, and it's a wonderful celebration of this beautiful world. So I really encourage you to check this one out. Next up is Claude, The True Story of a White Alligator by Emma Bland Smith, illustrated by Jennifer M. Potter. You may have heard of Claude before. He's pretty famous for an alligator. But even if you haven't, I think you can tell from the cover that Claude looks different than most alligators. That's because he was born an albino alligator, which means that his skin is all white. Unfortunately for Claude, this meant that living in his natural habitat was not safe because he was not able to blend in with his surroundings, which were mostly green. It also meant that some of the other alligators rejected him because they didn't understand why he looked so different. So Claude found himself in need of a safe home and in need of friends to live with. Fortunately, some amazing people stepped in and took Claude on a journey to find those things. And I'm not going to tell you what happened, but I think you'll really enjoy reading the story of what became of Claude. The next book I have for you is Curious Comparisons, a life-size look at the world around you by Jorge Doniger. If you are the kind of person who in everyday life has questions and wonders things, like when you scoop up a bucket full of sand, did you ever wonder how many grains of sand are found in that single bucket? You could stop and spend your day at the beach counting them, or you could check out this book. Another question, how many flowers must a honeybee visit to make 1 pound of honey? The number is astounding, but once again, you gotta check out the book. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this book is that the things pictured in it are pictured at life size. So you'll notice that this elephant foot, it couldn't all be pictured because they're so big. So when you're reading through this one and looking at the pictures, that's a fun thing to keep an eye out for, the real life size of things. I have another one for the nature lovers amongst us. This is The Screaming Hairy Armadillo and 76 Other Animals with Weird Wild Names by Matthew and Steve Murray, illustrated by Julie Ben-Bassett. This thing is chock full of amazing animal facts. And I can hear some of you telling me, I know all the animal facts there are to know. And I actually kind of believe you because I have heard some amazing animal facts from kids at the library. But I guarantee you that there's some new stuff in here that you haven't heard before. In fact, there were quite a few creatures in here that I had never even heard of and didn't know existed. For example, let's see, the sparkle muffin peacock spider, the bone-eating snot flower worm, the tasseled wabagong. There's some pretty weird and wonderful creatures. I think that you could wow your friends and family with some of these names and with some of these facts if you check this one out. All right, one more nature book for you. This is the ultimate Rockipedia. You'll notice again the National Geographic Kids label here. And yes, once again, the pictures are truly amazing in this book, especially if you love rocks and minerals and how beautiful they are. Or like me, maybe you're fascinated by volcanoes and how plate tectonics play into the creation of volcanoes. Or maybe you're just astounded at fossils and what it is to be able to look at a 1,000,000-year-old creature fossilized in rock. There's a ton of information in here. See how thick that is? So you could spend a lot of time with this one. I also have to mention, because I've been mentioning it to everyone, and you guys are no exception, that the Dice Mineralogical Museum at Calvin University in Grand Rapids is a really super cool place. So if you're into rocks and geology and you haven't been there yet, I highly recommend that you check it out. All right, moving away from nature now. I have for you Girls Who Build. This one is by Katie Hughes. In this book, you can read the story of a bunch of DIY builders around the world, actually. You can learn what got these girls started building things, what kind of materials they like to use, what are some of their favorite projects to build. And in fact, there are instructions to create some of the projects in the book, including Atalia's tea light holders, Alina's wooden doormat, Samantha's tree swing, some super cool projects that, who knows, maybe you could even create this summer while you have more free time. And I also have to mention, this book is not just for girls. This is for anyone who knows how satisfying and fun it is to build something with your own hands. I've got one more for you. This book is called Modern Art Explorer. It's by Alice Harmon, illustrated by Serge Bloch. So if you are an art lover, this book is like going to a museum or a gallery, or maybe outside to see some murals with a tour guide who knows a lot about art and also knows how to make it really interesting. So you will find out the stories behind some of the pieces of art, some of which are quite famous and you may very well have seen them before, others of which are more obscure. I discovered artists in here that I had never heard of before that make some really fascinating work that I want to learn more about. The other thing I liked about this book, beyond just kind of learning some of those stories and facts, is that this book helps you to learn how to engage with any piece of art that you come across. It'll encourage you to ask questions like, when I look at this piece of art, what am I thinking? How am I feeling? Or what questions arise in my mind when I look at this piece? Or even, I wonder what the artist must have experienced, or what the artist must have been feeling that caused them to create this piece of art. So it's done in a really fun, dynamic way, and a great way to just pause and take some time to appreciate art this summer. You can dip in, look for something that interests you, set it down, pick it back up again. It's that kind of book that I think you'll just enjoy spending some time with. So thank you for listening today, and I really hope to see you in the library sometime this summer. See you next time. Bye-bye.
I am going to start out here with H is for Honeybee, and this is by Robin Smith van Frankenhausen, and it's illustrated by Eileen Ryan Ewan. This is put out by Sleeping Bear Press. You might recognize the author from having done other things with Sleeping Bear Press. And they have out a lot of different informational alphabet books about different states and areas and that kind of thing, different subjects. But I picked this one up because I happen to be a big fan of bees. Not only do they do wonderful things for us, but I just think they're kind of cool. So I picked up H's for Honeybee. This is, of course, an alphabet book. So for every letter of the alphabet, there is an interesting fact about bees and beekeeping. So it kind of look like that. Some really great in-depth illustrations. That have all that information right there, a wealth of information right there. So you can kind of delve in really deep to the words. You can mostly look at the pictures, whatever works for you. So after you get through reading all about the history of beekeeping and the way that bees work and how humans have interacted with bees since the dawn of time and that sort of thing. Once you get through all of that, there is even more in the back where you can find out ways to help bees. You can help learn how to plant flowers that bees like, things like that, things that'll support the bee population, as well as how to become a beekeeper, and just some more information about that. So once you read this, if you're like, hey, we need to start keeping bees at our house, you can get a little more information about that. Then next I have The Girl with a Mind for Math. And this is the story of Ray Montague. It's by Julia Finley Mosca and illustrated by Daniel Riley. And so this is about a woman that I had never heard about before, Ray Montague, who was born in 1935 in Little Rock, Arkansas. And she just loved math. She had a really great mind for math, as this title suggests. And one day she found she saw a submarine that had just been built, and she wanted to know, how are these things built? What do you do to build a ship? And so that was when she first learned about the profession of engineering and about how math worked with that. And so she knew that she wanted to study math and engineering, and she wanted to do that for a living. Now, unfortunately, being a girl at the time, she was not encouraged to go into math at school. And what's more is when she then went to go to college, she was told that she could not enroll in the engineering program because she was Black. So here it is, this brilliant young African American woman who is not able to go through the traditional path of becoming an engineer because of sexism and racism. So she kept working at it, and she did everything she could to get into that profession. She after school, she got a job as a typist at an office where they were doing engineering. She kept taking night classes. She learned how to use computers. I remember she was born in 1935, and so this was not something that she grew up with. So she had to learn how to use big computer terminals and things like that. And then at one point, she was, after learning some more of that, there was a need for warships. The United States government needed more ships. And so it was kind of a race of who could get this done the quickest. And this woman designed a ship in 18 hours. I don't even think I can get all my laundry done in 18 hours. I mean, this is just amazing. And so she really saved the day with that. Unfortunately, she made this wonderful thing, and she wasn't even invited to the unveiling of the ship because she was a Black woman. And so really, this is just, it's an internal struggle. It was an internal struggle for her, but she just kept fighting forward because she knew that she had that in her, and that was what she loved and what she wanted to do. One of the things that I really love about this book is the fact that the author spoke with Ray Montague as for most of the information in the book. There are also some other resources in the back, bibliography, some other articles and things, some other books to read, and videos. So that is another great resource. So once you read about her and want to know even more, you can take this and run with it. I also just had to show that I love the end pages, which are submarines. So it looks really cool too. It's got great illustrations, great information, and all around a fantastic read. And then I have one more picture book here that's nonfiction. The thing that I love the most about these picture books is that you can get kind of the right amount of information. They're all heavily illustrated, but with text as well, sometimes more, sometimes less, but they always have some additional information usually in the back so that you can follow up with those little tidbits of information that you discover when reading the book. And this one is called Mars, Earthlings Welcome. This is by Stacy McNulty and illustrated by Stevie Lewis. This is part of a series of a bunch of different planets, and it's just really fun. So the first part of the story, this kind of tells a little bit about like some fun facts about Mars. Talks about having a party with Mars, and it's just really like fun illustrations. You can have a good time. And it also discusses some new ideas about Mars. So this is not like just old and boring. I mean, this talks about how humans want to go to Mars and what that will look like in the future. There's a fun little quiz and some other sources. So just like A Girl with a Mind for Math and even H is for Honeybee, you have a lot that you can draw from at the end once you're ready to learn more about Mars. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit now, moving away from the picture books and going to the giant book right here. This is by one of my favorite scientists ever, TV or otherwise, Bill Nye. Bill Nye's Great Big World of Science. This is co-written with Gregory Moan, who has written other books with Bill Nye. And one of the first things that I want to point out is of course the shiny cover, which always makes things fun. Reminds me of like the brand new Guinness Book of World Records, just like all kinds of information in the shiny cover. But also look at how thick that is. Like there is just a ton of stuff in here. So just like if you've ever seen Bill Nye do a show or read anything else by him or heard him talk, he is super fun and just fascinated by science, all kinds of science, which for me is great. I'm kind of a science nerd, but there's no particular area that I really like and dislike. And so I love the fact that this talks about everything from the human body to greenhouse gases to engineering kinds of things. Why does my cell phone battery die? There are resources that you can follow up. One of the things I really love too is the fact that there are little experiments you can try throughout it. But it's huge. So you can go through and you can read it start to finish if you want, or you can just kind of pick out the areas that you're interested in when you're interested in them. So I really, really recommend this one. It will provide you with hours of entertainment. All right, and now I'm getting to a little bit of the books for a little bit of the older kids, little less photo heavy or illustration heavy, and more text heavy. And this first one here is by Ruby Bridges, and it's called "This Is Your Time," and this talks about her experience. For those of you who don't know, Ruby Bridges was one of the first children to go to an integrated school, and in Little Rock, Arkansas. Here she is as a 6-year-old. She had National Guard members there to kind of protect her as she was going into this school as an African American student, joining the school, and so it was very dangerous for her. But she was so brave, and she didn't just stop with entering at that school. She has worked for civil rights for her whole life, basically. So this talks about her experience and how kind of the context in a little larger civil rights struggle. She talks a lot about John Lewis, and in fact, dedicated this book to him, the congressman who was huge in the civil rights movement, who passed away last year. And not only are there actual pictures of of the times of actual protests and demonstrations and her going to school and that kind of thing, that are really powerful. There's just also just hearing this in her own words is pretty amazing. So this is a fantastic one. And the thing that I think is amazing too, since this happened before I was born, sometimes I think of it as a really long time ago. But then I look and I see Ruby Bridges is still alive, and she was, only 6 when this happened. And so um, this really isn't that long ago. So I think it's really important to learn that, like, that very recent history, just to see how far we've come in the past, few years, or several few decades, and then where we can go from there. So it's very inspiring, very interesting. I highly recommend it. It's not that long of a book either, so it's definitely something that is accessible, and you can pick it up and read all about it, and it won't take too super long. And the next book I have here is Race Against Time. This is by Sandra Neal Wallace and Rich Wallace, and is about a man named Scipio Jones, who I never heard of before. And so that's one of the great things about being a librarian and having to go through and check out brand new books, is that I learn stuff all the time. So this book uh, tells the story of a man who, after a massacre of African American sharecroppers in 1919, there were 12 men that were accused of fighting back, I guess, and that were arrested and possibly were going to be executed. And so Scipio Jones, who was a former slave, and a self-taught lawyer, because at that time he was not able to go to law school, um, but he volunteered to try to win freedom for these 12 men, to prove that they were innocent. The entire country was kind of set against him. I mean, there was this the massacre happened because of racism, and it was really hard to make a case for these men because of racism in the era. And and this is just a fascinating journey through that whole process of his fight to get these men free. So not only does this tell the story of his life and the things that he accomplished, and what he did for these men, but it also gives a good picture of sharecropping and racism in America, in the early 20th century. So it's a really important book. This one obviously is a little bit longer than some of the other ones, so it might be a little bit more for older readers, but it's still a very accessible book, and it's a really important part of our history. So I highly recommend this one as well. The last book I have for you is My Name is Tani and I Believe in Miracles. And this is the story of this boy, Tenetalua Lua Adewemi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this was written with both of his parents and Greg Borlass. This is a boy who very recently won a chess championship. But the thing is this is not a kid who grew up in a fancy house playing chess all the time. He's a Nigerian refugee. He and his parents were forced to leave Nigeria. Um, his father is Nigerian royalty. I mean, so they were very well off in Nigeria and had very successful lives. But then when they had to leave the country, they lost everything. And so here's this little boy who ends up partially growing up in a homeless shelter in New York. And one day he learns how to play chess, and this is just becomes his life love. And so so I believe he is like the youngest kid to win a chess championship in the United States, something like that. Um, but this tells about all of his hardships, like all of the things he had to go through, and the experience of being a refugee um, being a refugee in any other country, really. Um, and then still, going from having things to having nothing, and then still finding the time, when your parents are working and trying to make do, and you're trying to get by just in school and things like that. And here he finds this chess, his love of chess, and he becomes a champion. Like, he just keeps practicing all the time. One thing that I know that it says in there talks about how his coach said that the great thing about chess is that the people who tend to win are the people who practice all the time. And so this was something that he could really take control of. And he ended up winning a championship, and he's very young, so he's still got more in him. But I love the fact that this story is told from his point of view. I mean, he's the one who's basically talking about his whole life and all of his experience. And so I really hope you get inspired by that. So this is a newer book about a newer event, and so hopefully you'll find some interest in that. Well, thank you for listening to all of these nonfiction books, and I hope you can pick some of them up, and I hope that they are good recommendations for you.